Hey, Agile folks. Welcome to Agile Bytes, a show powered by Integrity Inspired Solutions, where we build software in an agile manner day in and day out. I'm Phil Ledgerwood, and today I would like to talk about a topic that actually has come from our audience, which is awesome. I would like to take a minute and remind people that if you do have topics you'd like for us to talk about on this podcast, or somebody you'd like us to talk to, or something you want us to review, or anything like that, don't hesitate to let us know. We've got a long list of topics, but your input will help us set priorities, and you might come up with something we didn't even think about. So feel free to hop over to integrityinspired.com and get in touch with us that way, or hunt me down on LinkedIn, Phil Ledgerwood, and get in touch with me there, and we'll be happy to take your suggestions and work them into future shows. If my voice sounds like I have been sick for a week, it's because I have. No, that's it. I've been sick for a week. But I am very happy to talk about today's topic. I think it's one that a lot of people have to deal with, depending on where you sit in the organization and how your organization is going about increasing agility. And this question is about, how do we get buy-in from our teams? And usually the way this comes into being is you've got an organization, they're wanting to increase their agility, or something they've heard Agile will do for them. And somebody somewhere in the hierarchy, somewhere in management, has made a decision about this that is going to impact the teams further down in the hierarchy. So maybe somebody decided, okay, we're going to do Scrum now, or we're all going to do Kanban now, or maybe, we're going to do the Spotify model now. So now all of a sudden, everyone sort of has to comply with these marching orders. And you've got somebody at the top of the chain who has made this decision for some reason, trickles down the chain, and it gets down to the teams. Well, who's responsible for getting these things to the teams? Well, it could be middle management. It could be agile coaches. Maybe you've got Scrum masters trying to get a team to do Scrum better, and you want to know how to get buy-in from the team. The interesting thing about this topic is I was actually approached by two different people this past week about this topic. One from a Scrum master trying to get buy-in from their team about Scrum practices. The other from a Kanban dude who manages several teams and has a lot of suggestions for those teams on how they could be doing things differently, and kind of having trouble getting them to sort of go along with it. So you have this person who has some great ideas for things their teams could do better, and they were excellent ideas, by the way, but having trouble getting the team to get on board with them. And this is something I think a lot of people who kind of sit at that sort of coaching or management level often run into. The very people who listen to this podcast, actually, you've probably run into this. I got this great thing that the teams need to do, but they're not doing it, or they're doing it very inconsistently, or they're complaining about it the whole time. How do we get buy-in? The interesting thing about the need to get buy-in is we're already starting on the back foot, right? Why do you need to get buy-in from your team? There's really only one situation where that is a necessity, and that is when you bring something from the outside that is forced upon them. And this is true of any situation, right? Where you need to get buy-in from somebody, is they didn't come up with it. If they came up with it, if it's their idea, you wouldn't need to get their buy-in, right? They'd already be on board. But you brought something from the outside to them, and now you have to kind of convince them to do the thing. That's the scenario. If you think about any aspect in your life, even in just your relationships, or if you're a parent and you've got kids and you're like, how can I get them to buy into XYZ? All those scenarios have that one thing in common, that you are bringing in something from the outside to this person or group of people, and now they have to live with it, or you want them to live with it, as it turns out. So I've got a couple of things I want to share with you from my experiences working with a lot of different teams about getting buy-in. And the first one strikes right to the heart of that situation, and that is to actually have the idea come from the team, not from the outside. This is something I see organizations do over and over and over again. They want their teams to improve in some way, or their operations to improve in some way. They think greater agility will do it for them. They pick some kind of tactical framework to apply to their organization that they think will do this thing. Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban, you name it, the whole alphabet soup of frameworks that are out there. And now the teams are kind of at the mercy of this mandate, right? Now all of a sudden, they're a Scrum team. Well, they didn't vote for that, right? They didn't come up with that. They weren't sitting around reading about Agile frameworks and Agile methodologies and decided to be a Scrum team. But now they've been told they have to do it, right? Or substitute Scrum with any framework or any practice in there. And that's where the resistance comes from. They didn't have a voice. They didn't pick it for themselves. So now you have to win them over, right? They're being forced to do something that affects their operations quite a bit, the way that they work. And there are very few things more personal than the way a person or a team chooses to do their own work. But now you are disrupting that with this external thing that they didn't get to actually have a voice in. A long time ago, I was a team lead for a very, very large financial institution. And I would set a lot of the architecture for the things that our teams were producing. And there was this one guy who just seemed like he would fight with me about everything. If I said that the sky was above us, he would debate that with me. He just had to fight about every single little thing. I dreaded talking to the team about different initiatives or different directions that we were going to go with the architecture because I knew this guy would be all over me. Well, one month, I knew that I was going to be making a fairly large change to the way we did data access. I was introducing the repository pattern, which probably seems like old hat to most of you, but pretty groundbreaking stuff a couple of decades ago. And I knew this guy was going to be all over me, right? So I actually called him on the phone the night before and I said, Chuck, not his real name, I've got an architectural change that I want to roll out to the team, but I'm concerned because it's a big change and I don't know if they're going to like it. I don't know if they're going to see the benefit of it. And I don't know how to communicate it to them in a way that I think they're going to be okay with. Could I explain the idea to you and you could talk with me about it and maybe we could come up with a version of it that would be really good for the team and that they would be okay with. So this guy and I, we talked for like 45 minutes. We basically just kept my idea as it was, but he had a few things to say. And for years, this guy was the biggest champion of this idea. We would have retrospectives and he would bring this idea up out of nowhere. Ever since we started doing data access this way, it's just made all this so much easier, blah, blah, blah. It's like he would have made t-shirts about the repository pattern if I had let him. What changed? Well, it probably wasn't that my idea was so brilliant that it won him over. It's just now he had a voice, right? He hadn't had a voice before. He was just at the mercy of my dictates. Whether the dictates were good or bad is irrelevant. He was not able to have a voice in them. And as soon as he had that voice, it completely changed his alignment with the idea. So that's the first thing that I want to throw out to you. Did your team pick Scrum? Did your team pick Kanban? Did your team pick whatever practice you're trying to throw on them? If not, then you might want to figure out how you can turn that dynamic around. Can the team just pick their own stuff? Can they pick their own way of working? Can you say, hey, I read about this idea or I heard about it. I don't know if it's any good. I don't know if we want to try it or not. What do you guys think? And bring them into that discussion, hear what they have to say about it, instead of saying, hey, we've got to do daily stand-ups now. Or, hey, we got to do Scrum now because we're all being agile. We got to be Spotify, and even though we're an adhesive manufacturing company, we have adopted the business model of a streaming music company. Like instead of doing that, get your team involved so that the idea comes from them. If you are coaching them on Kanban, don't make their Kanban board for them. Let them do that. Let them tell you. Right? Don't tell them what their whip limit should be. Let them tell you. Don't tell them what retrospective format to use. Let them tell you. Now, I do want to say that there is definitely room for people who know what's up to give advice to teams or to give suggestions to teams. I don't agree with the position that Agile coaches or Scrum masters or managers or whatever should never give teams direction, that they should only be kind of passive, asking questions. I don't hold to that. And there's a number of reasons for that, not the least of which, a lot of times when teams are new to this, they don't have ideas. They don't know what to do. And so your suggestions or your direction are just as valid as anybody else's on the team. So don't feel like you can't say, hey, what if we tried whip limits? Or what if we tried daily stand-ups? Or do you think Scrum might help us in this situation? There's nothing wrong with that. The point is, though, is that the team has to be the one to put their seal of approval on it, right? It has to come from them. And if you're having trouble figuring out how you might get that to come from the team, then try this. Instead of bringing them the solution, bring them the problem. Tell the team, hey, we're not getting things done as fast as the business needs it. Or the rate at which we get things done is all over the map. Nobody can tell when we're actually going to release things or not. Or every time we release something, we end up having 20 bugs once it gets into production. Bring the team the situation and then let the team figure out experiments to solve it. This is one of the reasons why when people are just starting agile practices, I usually tell them, if you're trying to pick a starting point, pick the retrospective, pick the self-improvement mechanism, because that will give you the forum to spin out everything else. Team, here's a big issue. We got to figure out what to do about it. What do you think? And if people are having a hard time coming up with stuff, you're a coach, you're a scrum master, you're a manager. You listen to the brilliance that this podcast gives you every week, right? You've got ideas. So go ahead and throw them out there. That's fine. You're a team member too. But the point is to try to get whatever your team is doing to be the team's idea. Because if the team volunteers an experiment, if the team says, hey, why don't we give this Scrum thing a try? Or the team goes, hey, maybe Kanban is going to be a great fit for us. Maybe we should try that for a while. You don't have to get buy-in. You automatically have buy-in because the idea came from the team themselves. They are participating in the thing that they wanted, the thing that they selected, the thing that they had a voice in. So you don't even need to get buy-in. You've totally turned the issue on its head because now the team is just doing what they agreed to do on their own in the first place. The second thing I would like to share with you is you have to be able to demonstrate how a given proposal is in the team's best self-interest. And I don't mean best self-interest in do this and you're going to get fired. That's not the kind of, I don't mean their best self-interest because you threaten them with something terrible if they don't do it. But I mean, whatever you're recommending to them, make sure you are able to articulate/demonstrate how this practice will change their lives for the better. And I find in my own experience, there's coaches that struggle with this, there's managers that struggle with this. And I hate to pick on this specific group of people, but it's endemic in this group of people. Scrum masters, especially if you are a newly minted Scrum master, you just got your certification. This group of people struggles powerfully with this. They know the practices, they know what you're supposed to do, but they're a little bit foggy on why these practices are the best things that the team could be doing. They don't understand and aren't able to articulate why a daily stand-up, for instance, will make the team's lives better. All they know is this is the Scrum way to do it, right? Or this is the Agile thing we're supposed to be doing now. So they can articulate and explain the practice, but they can't sell it. They can't cross that bridge and say, we should be doing daily stand-ups because if we did them, here's what you're going to get out of it. And I think that that is the key. If there's anything that you're recommending to your teams to do, or there's anything that your teams might be struggling to do, and you're thinking, wow, I don't really have buy-in here. Half the team is okay with it. These two people really like it. Most people really hate it. I'm having trouble getting on the same page about this healthy practice. Then have you ever been able to clearly articulate how this is actually going to make life better for the team members themselves? How this is actually in their best interest to pursue this practice? Let's say, for instance, that you're trying to get the team to be more consistent about a daily scrum or a daily stand-up, or, have more participation, have more people contributing, that sort of thing. You've been struggling with that. You got people who are super quiet or who don't come or what have you. One thing I would ask you is, have you made it clear to the team why the daily scrum or the daily stand-up actually helps them? Or have you just said, well, hey, this is Scrum, this is what we got to do, or hey, we're Agile now, we got to have this daily meeting or whatever. Have you ever actually sat down with them and said, look, the whole reason we're doing this is so you guys can see where the work is and decide how you as a team want to adjust to whatever the circumstances are on the ground, right? So if you're blocked, you get to decide how to deal with it. If someone's having trouble, you guys get to decide as a team how to deal with it. If a work item is behind, you guys as a team get to figure it out. I don't want to force that on you. I don't want some manager or someone from the C level coming down here and pointing at one of these work items and saying, "Hey, I want everyone to drop what they're doing and start working on this thing." That may be a good idea. That might be a terrible idea. I want the team to be able to figure out on a day-to-day basis what the right thing is to do to keep the items moving forward the way that they need to move forward. The daily scrum or the daily stand-up is an opportunity for you to choose. It's an opportunity for you to make sure everybody understands what you're all going through, and as a team to figure out how you want to respond to that, as opposed to other people who don't understand what's going on making those decisions for you, or you being off on an island by yourself trying to struggle with these things by yourself. I mean, every context is going to be different, right? And the reasons that appeal to your team might be different than the ones I just said. I'm just trying to give you an example, right? Do you know why the daily scrum or the daily stand up exists? Do you know what the value of a retrospective is? Do you know what a sprint is for? Do you know why that makes certain organizations' lives better? Do you know why it makes some developers' teams' life worse when they have a time boxed iteration? Do you know those things yourself, and can you articulate them? So I highly encourage you, if there's anything that it's your job to make sure that the team is doing or that it's happening consistently and the team is kind of struggling, and you don't know why that practice exists, you don't know what the benefit is, the selling point, find out, right? Send me an email by all means. I'll be happy to help you out with that. But not just know yourself, but to make sure the team is very clear on that, right? Like, whip limits are not just something we do because Kanban says we have to. What's in it for them? How is their self-interest served by having whip limits all of a sudden? Well, it's to make sure that you don't have 50 things on your plate at once. It's to make sure you aren't bogged down in the same piece of code for months and months and months. There's all kinds of selling points to these practices, and the team needs to know them. And if you can show your team that these things are in their best interest, it will make their lives better. Then two things happen. First of all, they have a much better disposition toward those practices than they had when your whole thing was, well, we're agile now, so this is what we got to do. The second thing is, if they know what the value is, if they know what the goal is, they can help you find even better ways to get there. They may have an idea about the stand-up that they like better and gets you that value. They may have an idea for your self-improvement or your team improvement events that will make those so much better and more engaging. They might say, you know what, having a whip limit on every column isn't going to help us out, but I know what you mean. I don't want our team to be swamped either. How about we just have a limit over the whole shebang, over the whole system, and try that for a while? They will help you come up with even better ways to achieve that value. And at the end of the day, as long as you're getting the value of those events, isn't that what you really want? Does it have to be done your way? Does it have to be done exactly the way somebody 5 tiers up from your team actually decided? Or is the value what's important? So not only do you get people more jazzed about those practices because you've shown them how it's going to make their life better, how it's really about them, how it's showing love to them, then they can also be your partners in coming up with new and different ways to get that value. So if someone says, hey, daily stand-ups suck, you can go, okay, well, all I ever wanted was a way for you guys to be able to come together to figure out together as a team how you can work through the different things that happen. Can we still do that? How do you want to do that? And maybe they'll have their own ideas about that as well. So that's tactic number 2. Make sure that you have shown how things are in the team's best interests. If you really try to do those things, one, where possible, have these things come from the team, not from you, not from management, not from upper management, not from the outside, but have them come up with them. And a big part of that is just confronting them with the need, confronting them with the problem, and having them join you on a journey to come up with solutions for that. If you can do that, And or if you can make sure that your team understands how those practices or your recommendations are in their best interest, it increases their joy, it makes their life better, then you are a long, long way to getting that buy-in that you need. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.